Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Saturday morning CS-Sensei live webinar. I hope everyone is interested in this topic, and I think that this will be a fun one for us. For many people, an interview is a scary thing, but it doesn't have to be. There's a difference. Imagine being nervous about paying a bill as compared to being nervous about buying a Beamer. You know, you're going down to the showroom and you're signing the paperwork for a Beamer, and you're really excited, but it's not a bad excitement. It's not going to stop you from buying that Beamer. So think about it that way. Just something for us to take into account here. I'm going to go through some slides. Feel free to interrupt me when you notice anything that you want to add to it. This is truly a collaborative thing. I want everyone to feel comfortable about offering your inputs. Harminder, if you're back on, I did mute you because I was hearing background from your office there, so just so you know. You've heard it a million times, but it is absolutely true. Your resume and your interview are you to the prospective employer. So you want to make sure that everything is exactly perfect. All right, and we'll talk about some of these things, but the phrase, "You'll never get a second chance to make a first impression," is really true, most notably in the interview. Okay, so just be thinking about that. Just to lay the groundwork here, prospective employers have two main tools to determine who their next selection is going to be. Number one is the resume, which they should have read, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute too. But the other is the interview. And you can't prepare yourself for everything, but just try and prepare yourself for the most common things. And be prepared to think on your feet. So ask yourself some stupid questions, because they might as well. That third bullet there, I have never encountered someone where their resume was so good that I didn't care how the interview went. Okay, they both work together. All right, so don't think that if you've got this over-the-top resume, it's going to sell you regardless of whether you conduct yourself well. All right, so impress people both with the resume and with your interview. Don't think that you're going to be able to slide through the interview. Take the time to study for it, practice for it, feel confident when you're going in. And it really helps, honestly, and you'll see this throughout the slides. It really helps to practice. What are they going to ask? How am I going to answer? If they ask this, how do I answer this? If they start talking about this, how do I address it? Think about those things before you're staring at the prospective employer or employers. They could have a panel. Think about it in advance, okay? So this is, Harminder.
I have two questions. The first, you mentioned about the first impression. So what does the first impression include? Does it include the dress up? Does it include when you go sit there, give an interview, how's your eye contact and how you perform the interview? And the other question I have, when you're explaining everything, are you covering the salary negotiation too? After the interview, sometimes they ask about the salary, what you're expecting and what you're sometimes they don't tell anything. They ask me what you are. So that I just want to discuss when we have a chat. Thank you.
Sure. I appreciate that. Both of those questions are good ones. I did not cover the second one, so I'm going to cover that one right now. When they talk about salary, you should have found out what the typical salaries are for that position. And this is especially critical if you are changing career fields like you did. You came from one field where you were being paid a certain amount, and you're going to another field that if you don't have a reference, at least start with where you were. Say, well, when I was working here, you know, I did this and this and this, and I got paid this much. I'd like to be somewhere near that range in this new career field. That gives them at least an awareness of what your expectations are. You know?
So, yeah. So my question is, where I find the base? I am working here. They did not mention everything on the website. Nobody ready to tell me where is the base. So if I look at the website, because the different companies, they have a different base. Some start 50, 55, 40. So I have a problem where I asking the base, how I find it.
Yeah, you want to be within their range because they know what their range is when they ask you that question. I can hire as low as this or as high as this. So you want to be somewhere within that range. You have to understand that range. I think Indeed has salary ranges and salary.com has ranges. Chris?
Glassdoor is another one.
Glassdoor. Okay. And Glassdoor, I think it's important to note that Glassdoor is from people who are there at the time. They're actually reporting as employees or managers within that company.
So
yeah, that's a good one, Chris. Glassdoor, Indeed, and salary.com.
Thank you.
Sure. Also, there are regional differences. I remember long ago, my resume got put in somewhere. I didn't even know about this. I got notified that they wanted to interview me for a job at Xerox PARC, P-A-R-C. I don't know if any of you go back that far, but Xerox PARC was the Palo Alto Research Center in Palo Alto, California, Silicon Valley. Xerox, which back in those days was a big name. And I thought, oh, wow, you know, what a great job. And they said, we're planning, you know, the base salary is $100,000. And I was like, wow, that's great. Then I looked at the price of things like housing in Silicon Valley, and $100,000 quickly becomes a lot less based on the costs for the area. After I did my analysis, it equated to about $60,000 at where I was in Washington, D.C. So you hear $100,000, yeah, well, put that into perspective of where it's at, and that may change your idea. In the end, I never even agreed to interview. It wasn't enough. So, good question. And we're going to get to the first one as we go through this, Harminder. Okay?
Thank you.
All right. So, I'm talking about how they see you is the first part here. It's important for you to understand that the interview, they are not there to go through your resume as much as they're there to go through you. They're trying to evaluate you along with the resume. This is their second shot at learning about you. All right, so even if you hear them focusing on resume skills and stuff, they're evaluating how well you communicate. They're evaluating whether you have any annoying mannerisms. They're evaluating everything they can about you by looking at you and asking you questions and listening to you. All of that takes a play in there. And this second minor bullet, it says, you know, be careful about merely restating your resume. If they've read it, you should be expanding on what you have in your resume, not necessarily restating. You know, I have 4 years experience in this. And then you get into your interview and they say, what's your experience? You say, I have 4 years experience in this. Well, they already know that. And I put down this, they've probably read your resume because voice of experience. I have been called into interviews at the last minute, and as I'm walking in the door, they hand me the resume. All right? So don't think that they have thoroughly read your resume. Also, I have seen and experienced where we have 100 resumes to go through, and I forget who's who when we get in there. So, you know, you're going along and all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, you're the one that has this. So be aware that that can occur. Chris?
That should also stop you from the other end. If you bring your own resume, because some companies don't have that situation that Scotty has, where they have your resume on file,
yep,
and they have it ready to go, and they're there. You're probably going to go into companies where they just sat there, saw a list of names, saw the list of qualifications, and said, well, that's it.
Right.
You're it. And we want to interview you. Bring that extra resume. Number one, it's updated and not on your system, so you know what that resume is. You're being the advantage. And number two, they will give you something to look at while you expand upon your resume. Use it as a marketing tool, a brochure.
Right. I fully agree. I have a page on the resume coming up. That's why I was sort of jumping through the slides. Douglas, you were going to say something.
Real quick, yes. So it's how do you do? Normally, you're advised to bring a copy of your resume, you know, for anything, just for
multiple copies.
But what do you do in case that you have a Zoom meeting, for example, when it's a telemeeting?
You don't have the opportunity to do it if it's a video interview. But if it's in person, make sure you carry copies of your resume. Chris?
You at least
idea, Doug. If it was me, I would email it to the person who contacted you and say, can you please get this to the interviewees before the interview, and go from there. Okay. Otherwise, you're just flying.
I would be careful about that, Chris, and here's why. If I am preparing to interview you and your resume has gone through HR and then I hand you something different, that in the sales game, that's called bait and switch. So you've got to be careful. You've got to be careful. And as I'm talking about it in here, we're literally going through the slide that I haven't gotten to yet. Make sure that the resume you print out and carry with you is the same one that everybody else is looking at. Don't say, oh, I have an updated resume. Here you go. Don't give them anything new at the interview, because that can turn against you. Okay, so let's look at what's on the screen here. Notable characteristics. Let's say you've got tattoos all the way up the side of your cheek, or you're missing fingers, or you're 7 feet tall, or whatever it is. Be aware that they're going to catch that, obviously, but what they're looking at is how you act with yourself. If you, and I'll just give this example, if you've got a lot of, neck tattoos and you spend your time, doing this in the interview, you're not comfortable with yourself. And that's what they're looking for. Are you comfortable with you? I really don't, I don't get concerned if somebody has distinguishing characteristics if they act well with them. But if they spend all their time trying to, if they've got a scar on their hand or something and they're doing like this, that shows that they are not comfortable with themselves. And I'll pick up on that. So just be aware that that's, as we're going through this, just be comfortable with you as you are. Okay? A certain characteristic, like being overweight or that sort of thing, may have no relevance to the interview, but they want to see how you are acting with yourself. Raminder, I'm gonna mute you again, dude. Okay. They want to see how you are operating with yourself. All right? So just something to think about. I cannot say this enough. Dress to impress, even if it's with a video interview. Dress to impress. Use an iron. Make your clothing look clean, polished, and professional if you can. If you're on a VTC interview, make sure your background is not too complex. You notice mine has a lot of things. I considered whether I was going to change my background for this morning, but also realized that there are virtual backgrounds you can get. If you do, perhaps you want to have that. Make sure, I guess the important thing is that the background doesn't detract from you, the professional. Just be aware of that. Also, lighting. I make sure that I have lighting. My lighting is right here, and it faces down toward me. If you have lighting behind you, like a light out the window, sometimes all they see is the silhouette of your face, and they don't see your smile. They don't see your mannerisms, those sorts of things, because your lighting is in the wrong place. Make sure that they can see you and your face very well, very distinctly. Also, background sounds. If it's, you know, your kids like playing music or something, give them headphones for that period of time. Make sure that there's nothing that distracts. And then I ran into this morning, about an hour before I started this call. I ran an update on my Windows 10 system, and it said, you have to reboot. Okay, reboot. I had plenty of time to test and make sure everything worked after that. If you leave your computer up for a long period of time, days, weeks at a time, it's quite possible that it could act slowly during your interview, and there could be lags and gaps. So make sure that everything's fresh and clean that day. All right, Douglas.
Yes, in regards to dressing up, do you, if it's a telework interview, I mean, yeah, Zoom interview, for example, would you, is it recommended to wear a full suit or just a nice, you know, clean shirt and a tie or something like that, or even?
It depends on the position, but I would say for an entry-level position, which is what we're all, you know, thinking about in this, if it's for an entry-level position, I would say that a clean pressed shirt, and if you're comfortable with it, a tie would be totally suitable. I would not say that a suit will impress them unless, here's another thing, does your job involve routine and frequent customer contact? If so, then sure, maybe you want to go, you know, wear a vest over it or something that really looks like you took time to look good. But a suit on a video interview, I've seen them. It's a 50-50. It's up to you. If you're comfortable in a suit, wear a suit. But I would say that a clean pressed shirt or blouse and something else is a bare minimum. Bare minimum. Don't, you know, you see what I have here? It's not pressed. I pulled it right off the rack. So it came right out of my closet. Would I wear this at an interview? Absolutely not. Look professional. Don't just look like you. Chris.
What if you get a short notice interview?
Like, can you get on in the next 20 minutes?
Correct.
Find the cleanest, best pressed thing you can. Take the time to find the one that looks best. Here is one that I have run into so many times as an interviewee, you never want your pocket to start singing your favorite song or buzzing when you're in the middle of your interview. It demonstrates to them that you are not focused. Okay? Think about it. Turn the ringer off. Better still, turn the phone off. Okay? Now, again, I'm talking about you, the person here. All right? So everything is considered. What you say, what you don't say, how you say it, all of that makes, it's not just you expanding on the resume. It's you being yourself. All right? How you look, including hygiene. I've been in interviews where somebody smelled horribly. I didn't hire them. I don't care what their skills are. If they can't demonstrate personal hygiene, that tells me something. Their gestures and mannerisms. Make sure they're practiced. Don't say, oh, there's one more thing. Be comfortable in yourself. Now is not the time to try new things. Also, if you're on a video interview, and I just recommend this anytime, make sure you're centered. It is not a case of, hey, take a look at my ceiling. This is not a good way to interview. All right? Center yourself and use what's called the rule of the thirds. Have you guys ever heard of that? Rule of the thirds? If you've ever done videography, rule of the thirds means you divide your screen into thirds 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. Rule of the thirds says that your eyes are on one of those lines between the three. 1, 2, 3. You notice my eyes are right at the line between the top and the middle third. That's rule of the thirds. And I'm also in the center of the screen. Okay? Just weird videography point to be made there. But it does make a difference. I can't tell you how many times I've tried to teach trainers how to teach online, and all you see is, this much of them. By the time we finish, they are in the screen. And one other thing, know what people are seeing. I always do this. I do a top and bottom, side to side. That is my stage. I don't make gestures out here. I make gestures within the space that I have. Okay? So test out your space and say, that is where I have to work within. If you're going to do gestures in a video, do them within that space. Not, yeah, I've got 4 things to tell you about. They don't know. Stay in screen. And the bottom bullet that you see here is a very important one. You have to be able to balance between confidence, showing that you're confident, and not showing that you're a show-off. Okay? And there's a thin line. Some people look at somebody and say, oh, well, he just looked confident. And somebody else said, nah, he was bragging. He was bragging. So be aware that they're watching for that line. And that line is different if you have multiple interviewers. So always go for the lowest common denominator. Be as confident as you can without trying to show that you're prideful. Oh, and with the enthusiasm one, I talked about that. And there's nervousness about, I don't know what I'm going to say. And there's nervousness about, I'm buying a new Beamer. Try and think about that nervousness. It's a good nervousness. Okay? So here's some things to remember. Ask yourself why you think you're qualified. Okay? be prepared to answer it. Answer yourself and then practice it. I will tell you, when I was in my last interview where I got hired into this position and the CIO interviewed me, they asked that question, why should we hire you? They finished with that question. Why should we hire you? They had probably already made their decision, but man, I put the last seal on the deal because I had practiced that answer. I know this, I've done this, I've improved this, I make things better. And they got that. They understood that. All right, so practice your answers in this. Tell them how you fit in. That means you need to know what they're looking for. And sometimes that requires you to study the company, study the job vacancy announcement thoroughly, and make sure that you're prepared to answer, why do you fit in here? Get ahead of their objections. One of their main objections for people in the CS-Sensei is going to be what? What is going to be one of the main objections?
Experience.
Experience. Because you're talking about entry level. Now, Chris and I probably have some information or thoughts and ideas about this. Employers want everything. HR wants everything. So, they're going to want entry-level people with a CISSP. And that's just not going to work. So they're going to be settling on less than somebody who walks in fully qualified. They don't want to have to train you. They don't want to have to get you certifications. But if you already have the training, you already have the certifications, you already have the experience, you could be priced out of the upper limit of this particular position. You shouldn't be applying for it anyway. So you are coming in at the lower portion of this, and so therefore when they ask things like, you don't have very much experience, point to them about secondary skills you may have, about transferable skills, attention to detail, ability to put together projects, those sorts of things. All of those help to make you their choice. And again, always practice in advance, drawing a line of relevance between you and your resume and what they're looking for. Speak authentically. They'll know if you're not authentic. Be yourself and be comfortable with yourself. And you've heard it said, practice in front of a mirror. It really makes a difference. You can do that. Don't feel bad about doing that. Stand in your bathroom and interview yourself. And like I always say, do you believe you? Be serious with it.
Another thing you can do is you can download freeconferencecall.com and videotape yourself.
That's right. That's right. You can record yourself and then play it back. Harminder, yes, sir.
So I like your question. Do you believe you? Yes, I believe myself, but I don't have a confidence. I believe myself, but when I am in the interview, sometimes I don't have a confidence. What I am saying, is it right? What I am saying is I'm saying according to the interviewer, what he is expecting a such kind of answer. So that's I don't have a confidence. What I'm doing is right.
Right, right. It's a balance. Everybody is different. Okay, I'm gonna throw you with a reference to a movie. Do any of you remember the movie with Eddie Murphy, where he was the African prince? What was that movie called? I forget.
Coming to America.
Coming to America, right. Where he's standing there with this woman that's supposed to be his intended bride. And she walks in and she's gorgeous. I mean, just absolutely lovely. And all of the stuff that she's dressed in just looks perfection. And he says, well, what do you like? And she says, whatever you like. And he's like, well, you know, what are your hobbies? Whatever your hobbies are. You know, just be aware that that will not sell you to say, I'll do anything you want. That is not a way to win hearts in an interview. You've got to be yourself. You've got to present a difference. The benefit of hiring me is this. Okay? The benefit of hiring me. And you've got to be able to tell them that. Secondary skills. We talked about this. Soft skills, activities you perform for your community, a nonprofit organization, or even your family, if it's relevant. For example, if somebody asks me what I'm doing for, you know, I don't know, let's say finances, I say, well, I'm personally mentoring my grandkids in how to conduct their own personal finances. And my wife and I have actually started them on programs that are going to make them financially capable when they get older. That has nothing to do with a job, but it shows that I am willing to put myself into other people's lives for their own benefit. Okay? So look at the things that you do in light of how they make the world a better place. And if it's relevant, use it. Carry a pad and pen. I'm serious. Here are some examples. This is a nice pad. Okay. Clean, compact, is not going to use a lot of space. Here's another one, and I learned this from LinkedIn. Black and red. You can buy this from most any stationery store. Black and red is a notable design that people are carrying these days. Back in the old days, it used to be something else, but now they're carrying black and red. And you notice it also has this cute little binder thing on it. If you carry your resumes inside, this will hold them so that they don't fall out at an inopportune time. Okay? And it's full size, so you can fit a full-size resume in there. Pens. I can't tell you the number of times I've gone into interviews where the interviewee was using one of these ghastly pens. Look, it writes in orange or pink or whatever. This is not a positive to me. Find a pen that looks like you could be a professional. This is just an off-the-shelf pen. But it looks, I mean, imagine, you know, this is a fashion statement. This is not a pen. And if you can, check this out. I actually have an engraved pen with my name. All right? And oh boy, do I use it, even if I'm, you know, just pulling it out, listening. Okay, all right. Writing down notes or whatever. Okay. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Make it look professional. It does make a difference. Yes?
Yeah. This could also help you release a little bit of nervousness.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you don't know what to do with your hands, but if you have one of this and you're there, you know, it's holding on to something.
Yeah, it's a two-edged sword, though, Douglas, because you can also hit something and fidget.
Yeah, start going like this, or
you know, I'm sitting talking about how good I am at, you know, exchange administration and stuff, and all they're seeing is this guy can't contain himself. You know, so it's a two-edged sword. If you put something in your hand, make sure that you're not playing with it.
Okay.
You know, that is not a bad thing. Have it sitting on the paper. You can be ready to write and not write, but just be aware that, you know, that's just going to totally distract from the interview. Okay? Here's another one. Control your fashion statements. Conservative is always best in an interview. I've been in interviews where the individual wore so much smelly stuff that I wanted to open a window. Also, you should recognize that you're trying to come across positive, but I actually knew somebody who was allergic to fragrances. It would make her sick to be in a room with somebody that had cologne on. Okay? It does occur, and you don't want it to occur in your resume. Nails that are as long as, you know, somebody's kitchen knives, maybe not the best time to be showing off, you know, your talons. Facial hair, make sure that it's managed. Don't have, you know, stuff hanging out all over the place. Your haircut makes a difference. Whatever you're wearing, make it clean. Make it look managed. You may have the, you know, the fashion statement is for some things to be pointing all over the place. Okay, but make it look managed. And yes, even down to your shoes. Wear something that looks managed. Okay? Here's the one we were talking about, Chris. A couple extra copies. Don't switch the resume. Make sure they're printed on clean, smooth paper. Printer paper is fine. And be prepared to restate what you've written without getting exasperated. Well, like I said in my resume, don't do that. The individual could have just been handed a resume when they walked in the door. Do your homework on your employer. Learn about them so that you can answer the inevitable question, do you have any questions about us? Ask questions that demonstrate that you've taken the time to learn about them. You know, if they, for example, they don't talk about the hours. You say, is this a 24/7? Will there be rotating shifts? Is there any weekend work or travel involved? Because the resume or the job vacancy didn't give that information. Good questions. Good questions. That doesn't say anything bad. You know, the interview is not the time, by the way, to be stating your demands. For example, do you have any questions about us? I can't work Saturdays. You know, no, and that's the wrong time to bring that up. Okay? So, well-rehearsed questions can seal the deal, and poorly researched questions can sink the ship. Just a way to think about it. Your questions at the end of the interview where they say, do you have any questions of us? Don't whine. My wife brought this one up to me this morning. The interview is not the time to be complaining about your coworkers or managers or, you know, how bad it was in your previous job. Because guess what? Your new supervisor could be your old supervisor. You could both be getting rehired. You never know. So again, like it says in the bottom bullet, if you can't say anything good, just don't say anything. Okay, here are some quotes. I thought I would go through these, and then we'll do the mock interview, and you guys can ask me questions. You saw this on Facebook this week. Somebody said, oh, yeah, I'm going to be a certified lash technician. And this was like for a system administrator job. And they asked, they said, you know, can you tell us anything more about you? Oh, yeah, I'm going to be a certified lash technician. The problem with that is it was so distant from the interviewer's frame of reference that somebody at the interview asked why is it important that you're going to be a lab technician? And so this individual had to say, no, lash technician, eyelashes, I like doing eyelashes. And it just sunk the ship. She was not hired because it was so off the mark. All right, so be aware of that one. Here's another one that I hear frequently and I think you should avoid. Tell us more about yourself. I'm a hard worker. What you're trying to indicate is everyone else is not a hard worker, which is not true. They assume that you're a hard worker. And you also say, I'm a people person. That can only be determined by your employer. You can think you're a people person and yet people avoid you. You can think you're a people person and people don't want to be on teams with you, whatever. So don't in an interview say, I'm a people person. That's a summation that your prospective employer should be making, if anybody. Chris, I see your thoughtful expression.
That's just a good dot, and I had it on mute, and I'm glad I had it on mute because I did a.
Yeah, I'm a hard worker. As compared to what? Okay, here's another one. I interviewed somebody a number of years ago, and I said, this is a small team. You are going to have to move back and forth between customer contact and project completion, sometimes multiple times throughout the day. What do you think about that? And he was talking to me, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, customers can be frustrating, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, what? Customers are the reason we're here. If a customer frustrates you, that frustration could come out, and then I get called because you're being a jerk. So this guy said customers can be frustrating. I did not hear another word in that interview. I did not hire him. Here's another one. I was getting ready to select somebody for the position, and as the interview ended, this person said, by the way, do you have any service level agreements for this position? Which is a very good question. She said, I would like to get a copy of those SLAs because if you select me, I want to knock your socks off when I arrive. I was like, holy smokes, I want this person. You know, because an SLA, a service level agreement, is to what level do you have to perform? Everyone on your team. And she basically said, I want to study that to start with. Whoa, she's way ahead of the curve. And yes, I hired her, and yes, I promoted her, and yes, I gave her a letter of reference when she left. She's now running the help desk at George Washington University. Absolutely top-notch to say, I want to impress you when I arrive. That, just saying that impressed me during the interview enough to where I hired her and then rehired her into a higher position. This was a good one. I had a help desk technician vacancy, and I noticed this person was coming in, and you know, help desk is not what you would call a person with a lot of skills. Help desk start off with a minor set of skills. And this individual was ITIL certified, I-T-I-L. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of ITIL, but it is it's something that the federal government tends to rely on a lot. And as a contractor, all of the leaders within my team had to be ITIL certified. But this was a help desk technician. And she walked in the door with a resume and it said she was ITIL certified. And I said, wow, you have ITIL certification? She said, oh, yes. I said, do you like ITIL? She said, oh, yeah. And I said, why? She thought about it a minute. She said, well, it tells me what I don't do. And I was so impressed by that answer because she understood what ITIL does. And she was able to describe it in a short reference to say, I know where I fit into the IT arena. My ITIL certification, I'm putting it to use because it helps me understand what I do, what I don't do. I thought that was a very unique answer. This is the one that I would not recommend anybody say, but I did. I was interviewing for a job at the Pentagon. I was in civil service, and I was being interviewed by a military officer. If you've ever been around the military, there's one thing that you should know. Military members must move. Hey, that was an alliteration. Anyway, military members must shift around. Nobody gets into a position and stays there 20 years. They move them around. It's just part of what they do. So this gentleman, this major, Air Force major, asked me, he said, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I knew that he was going to be gone in 5 years. Not good or bad, it's just because he's military. And I said, I see myself assuming your position when you leave. Now, I've heard from everybody from recruiters on down that said that was a dangerous response. But that also showed that I understood the system into which I was going. He knew that he wouldn't be there in 5 years. He wanted to get promoted out of it. Chris.
With the recruiter saying that's dangerous, and this is at risk of being the guy that says everything has vulnerability, anything that you do say, aren't you just going ahead and taking a risk anyway of how they're going to take it just from someone telling you as an audience? Because you took a risk. If that risk was successful, you would have been promoted, everybody would have been happy. But if the guy took it the wrong way, what can you do, Scotty? Yeah,
that's right.
Well. Yeah.
It was a well-considered response. And oh, by the way, it was for a position that was career-changing. Within 3 years, I had jumped 7 grades in civil service. Okay? It was my shot at the moon. And I walked in that door prepared to win it. Here's something that you got to be careful of. During the interview is not the time to be making demands. That's when you're speaking to HR after you've been selected. And now I'm going back to a really, really old one. My very first job, I walked in, I was 16 years old, had hair down to my shoulders, and it was working for a restaurant. And the manager said, well, everything looks good. You know, I'm prepared to hire you for the busboy position. This was going to be a busboy position at a restaurant. And he asked, he said, just one last question. Would you be willing to cut your hair for this job? Now, I don't think it was what I answered. I could have said yes. But my enthusiasm showed even on that question because I said, Steve, I would straight razor my head for this job. And he said, fine, I'll see you tomorrow. Okay? So be aware that you can turn any question and answer into a gain for you. Everything is an opportunity for you. Everything. And just be prepared for that. Okay. So ask me the questions that you think I'm going to be challenged with. Yeah, Douglas.
Just before we go into that section, at the end, it's always good to have some very well-researched questions to ask your interviewer. Is there a set number of questions that you should more or less, not go beyond, or you can ask as many questions?
I would say that you should remember that obviously their time is valuable. So I would say no more than 2. And they've got to be valid questions. No more than 2. Good question, though. I'm glad you asked that, Douglas.
Okay.
Yeah, don't arrive with a, oh, yeah, well, now that you mention it, no, don't do that. You take up the other half of the interview with your questions of them. No. That's a very good question, Doug. So, okay, what other questions do you think you're going to be asked, and how do we strategize the answers? Chris?
This one always frustrates me when my wife does a mock interview with me, and I can never find a great answer to save myself. So, Scotty, tell me about yourself.
Okay. Number one, first response. Be enthusiastic about yourself. Okay? This is not, when they're looking at this, they're looking at you, the person. All right? So, number one, you have to come across as enthusiastic. You notice, and I'll tell you this, did you notice that I leaned forward? Okay? I'm interested in me. All right? Even gestures can make or break the deal. Here's another one. A lot of people don't think about this. If I do this number or this number, I'm trying to draw from my memory. If you look down and to the side, that is actually body language for I'm about to lie. FBI profilers have said this. So the best thing to do when you're responding, thinking about a response, is to look up and to the side or straight up. Don't look down. Right?
Yeah, and I think one of the sides, it's you're imagining or you are visualizing or something like that.
Could be.
I can't remember. But
Could be. Could be. Harminder.
So I have a question. Sometimes the interview asks question, why we hire you? If we hire you, what you bring for us, for our team, and why you prefer our company instead of other companies? That's
Yeah, sure. What interests you in this position? Why are you interested in this position? You should be all over that. You should know the job vacancy announcement and say, I'm really interested in this because this is this is an area that I'm already interested in and I'm working on it here, but this is just going to allow me to fit right into what I'm doing already. Don't walk in the door and say, I'm an open slate, I will learn anything, I will do anything. No, have interests and match your interests with what they show on the job vacancy announcement. I want to learn about infrastructure stuff, and this is enterprise level, so I know I'm going to be operating in conjunction with other teams. Wow, we didn't even put that in the vacancy announcement. We said enterprise operations. Well, enterprise means a network of networks. So it's big. Enterprise, thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of customers. And everything has to work well together. That's an enterprise. So if you see that word, expand on it and say, I'm really interested in enterprise experience. I want to get that. I have local experience. I have corporate experience, but I want that enterprise experience because I'm ready for it. What else?
This question, I cannot remember specifically, but that where you mentioned, I think it's what you do. I think you started off with, I love cybersecurity or I love IT, but I can't remember the question. Remember?
Oh, you mean when I was in New York? The one I shared with? Yeah. That was where the CIO brought all of his folks in New York, and I flew up, or I took the train up to New York so that I could be there because he was asking things of two people that were on my team. He said, tell me about yourselves. And he began by saying, I'm a second generation immigrant. come from this, and my family is this, and this sort of thing. He didn't say anything about, these are my CIO credentials and qualifications. He spoke about himself, the person. Okay? So when somebody asks, tell me about you, they're not asking about you, the technician. They're not asking about you, the engineer. They're asking about what makes you, you. All right? So be thinking about your response in reference to what would interest them about you. Sometimes that's things like family. Sometimes that's things like, well, I just moved into the area, but I came from Silicon Valley where everything is business related. You know, those sorts of things.
Yeah, and that relates to your question, Chris. And by the way, I remember now, I can send this to you again or post it again. It's an article written by an HR person, actually she's from LinkedIn, and it talks about how to the 3-step process and how to answer that dreaded tell me about yourself question. I don't know if it's right, but I think it's good because she talks about talking, stating the problem, what the process solving is, and your passion with it. And then in her case, she said she would answer that question since she's in HR. She says, I love helping people find their career confidence. I do this by creating video courses and providing online career coaching that teaches best practices for career growth. This year, I'm hoping to help 1 million people with their careers via the global platform my coworkers and I built that gives users 24/7 access to tools and coaches they need to find greater career success and satisfaction. So more or less, those are, you know, along the lines with what she's trying to answer, those 3: problem, process, and your passion.
And an interesting read on that, not all of that is job related. A lot of that is, I want to try and help make people around me better related. In other words, you may have seen one of my signature blocks that I have. It said, leave this world a better place. Okay? I'll give a really strange example of this. I was in a meeting. We were standing in Network Operations Center, and the network chief was there. And he had this big old rack full of cables, Ethernet cables, and it looked like a rat's nest. While we were standing there talking, he looked up, he pointed to a position on the cable, snaked it all the way down and found the bottom portion of it, disconnected it, rerouted it to where it was, you know, more straight instead of being in the rat's nest, you know, and plugged it back in. While we were in this meeting, he did that with, I think, about 2 of the cables. And I said, you know, you could have dropped somebody off. And he said, yeah, but it was only for like 10 seconds. And I left this room better than I entered it. Even little things make a difference. And the same thing goes with you in an interview. Imagine people exiting an interview feeling refreshed instead of burdened. Oh my God, that guy was such a whiner, such a complainer. I'm going to be good for you. I didn't do very good in my last job, but I hope I'm better this time. No, you don't want to drag their spirit down. You want them to feel as enthusiastic as you are. Be enthusiastic about you. Harminder, this goes to your question. Be confident in who you are. I'm Harminder. Nobody knows Harminder better than I do. Okay. Any others? We've gone over our time.
Oh, holy moly.
I know. It's been fast. Any others?
Tell us why you think we should hire you.
That is a question that you always should be prepared to answer. And by the way, there are 2 that are not the same. Tell me about yourself and why should we hire you? Okay? Tell me about yourself is me the person. Why should we hire you is where I fit in. how I fit in. That means you have to know the job vacancy announcement, you have to know the career field, and you have to know the company that you're interviewing with. And all of those can be researched in advance. Why am I a perfect fit? And it's not always, I'm a hard worker. You know, you're looking for this. I can come in and I want to grow within this position. I'm gonna stick with you for some time because, you know, it's gonna take me a while to get from my entry level to a fully qualified level, and I'm happy to do that as quickly as I can. You know, I'm enthusiastic even though I don't have all the skills. I want to get all the skills as quick as I can so that I become a fast asset for you. By the way, did you notice my gestures? Watch them afterwards. I manage my conversation. I don't, you know, sit back and, oh, gee, I don't know, that sort of thing. Be forward, be positive, be confident. All of my gestures, I don't know if you've seen this, but all of my gestures are forward gestures. I want you to be impressed with me. I want you to know that if I get into your organization, I'm going to make it better. Small to large. Me to you. They all work. Does that help, Harminder? Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm noting it is really good answer. So if they ask you how you make our organization better, what new things you bring in the company or what thoughts?
The biggest thing that you bring, and it's hard to comprehend this, the biggest thing that you bring is you. And remember they said, tell me about yourself. You should be able to demonstrate through the course of the interview that you are positive, that you are strong, that you are flexible, that when people ask you questions, they leave with more than they arrived with. You are a resource, not a burden. And it takes some practice to do that. I've been working on it for many years.
Thank you. Yes, I must.
There are people that I walk into an interview and they impress me to the point where I say, you know, they don't seem to have all of these skills, but my gosh, they're trainable. I can get them there. But I love this person. Okay? We hired, true story, we hired somebody whose only job was working at Chick-fil-A. But man, this guy had nailed Chick-fil-A. He dressed the part, he acted the part, he was positive in everything he did. The first thing we did is we trained him up and then we put him out in front of the customers because he was a perfect fit for it. He would make a room better whenever he visited that room.
Okay. Sometimes they explain such kind of challenging situation when you are by yourself and how you manage. For example, so I am working myself, I am a new. So sometimes the vendor call, so we don't have any information in our system in the vendor. So he says, I am calling from the blah blah company. I just got the alert from your server. I just want to make check is your server is working fine. So I am the first guy who receive the call, create the ticket and give the solution. Because we have a different team, I don't have any information of the server and all these things. So they ask you how you resolve this problem. They ask, so how you, in the interview, they said, just explain how you approach your team. If your team is busy, and explain the challenging situation, you are unable to solve it, and how you try to solve it and whom you follow, whom you approach. That kind of question sometimes they ask about.
This is a very good question. You should also be able to refer to the written procedures in your previous job. If you were a low-level or entry-level person, you're not expected to know everything, but you're expected to know where to go to get it. With our current service desk, they have a knowledge base of over 1,000 articles, and all they have to do is type in keywords, vendor. Here's all the knowledge base articles relating to that, to a vendor. Chris.
I have a story about that or question, and hey, you guys have a knowledge base. I had a knowledge base back at my old job where I could go ahead and research it and look it up. Look at the actual vendor's documentation to see if there's any articles or forums, people, the technicians talking about it, and I can Google it. And the interviewer broke character and probably broke the rule, but he said, that was the best answer we ever had with anybody we interviewed. But you forgot one thing, Chris, that everybody else got that you didn't. You got all the hard stuff. And I go, what? And the name first. I'm gonna leave that censored for that minute. He goes, we have a group of employees who know a lot of things. Don't be afraid to get out of your cube and talk to them and run your problem by them. He goes, I probably know why you didn't answer, because I'm gathering from you that you're an introvert, but you need to be brave and come out and talk to people and get that information. But your answer was very well spoken because you remember the hard stuff, not the easy one.
That's another, we're going over time, but I think it's okay here. That's another response that people don't want to hear from you is, I'm a team player. They should get that in the interview. Don't tell them you're a team player. They should understand that by, in this case, referring to your coworkers. If I don't have it, I know the guy upstairs will. Something like that. They're calling in reference to network equipment, and I know that day there's somebody from NetOps, not supposed to be there, but they're in there working on the weekend. I'm going to call and ask them. Your ability to use your resources, not just do you know. Yeah, very good, Chris. Okay, guys, we are like out of time. Okay, so had a good time. Rod, good to have you today. I saw you on there, but we're gonna cut this short. Thank you, guys. Had a great time.